It was the first day of fall in Clearwater, Texas, a small town surrounded by wide-open fields and dense oak forests. The sun shone warmly through the amber leaves as Lily Mason walked briskly back to her apartment from the post office. The streets quiet and calm in the early morning light. The air smelled crisp, carrying the peaceful beauty of the morning. Lily couldn't shake the strange unease settling in her chest. At 24, Lily had settled into the quiet rhythm of life in Clearwater, living in a modest apartment she had rented after moving from Austin. As an artist, she preferred solitude, spending her days in front of her easel, painting landscapes and portraits that captured the stillness of the world around her. It was a simple, quiet life that suited her well, until today. When she had first opened the mailbox that morning, she hadn't expected anything unusual. Bills, advertisements, and a few letters, nothing out of the ordinary, but buried beneath the stack was an envelope with no return address. The paper was thick, old, and faintly yellowed with age. What caught her attention most was the neat handwriting scrawled across the front. Lily Mason. She tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The words on the page were written in elegant cursive, beautiful but unfamiliar. The letter wasn't addressed to her, at least not directly. It was addressed to someone named Sarah Evans, and its words spoke of deep regret, sorrow, and a plea for forgiveness. The writer promised to make things right, apologizing for their past mistakes, and begged Sarah to come back home. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she read through the letter, her confusion growing with every line. Why had she received this? And who was Sarah Evans? The letter was old, dated 15 years ago, yet it was delivered to Lily, who had only recently moved to Clearwater. There was something about the letter that didn't feel right. It wasn't just a mistake. It felt like a message meant for her. With a sense of growing unease, Lily stared at the letter in her hands. The feeling of being watched crept over her. What had she stumbled upon? And why did it seem so personal? Lily sat at her kitchen table, the letter still clutched in her hands. She had read it again and again, searching for any clue that could make sense of what she had found. But the more she tried to make sense of it, the more questions arose. The letter was addressed to Sarah Evans, but Lily couldn't recall ever hearing that name before. And why had it been delivered to her? The idea of a mix-up seemed implausible. This letter had to be for her somehow. But how? Who was Sarah Evans, and why had she been so important to the sender? There was only one way to find out. Lily decided to visit the Clearwater Library. It was an old building with dusty shelves and creaky wooden floors, a place she had visited only a handful of times since moving to town. But today, it would be her starting point. Walking into the library, she approached the front desk where a middle-aged woman with short curly hair sat. "Can I help you with something?" the librarian asked, eyeing Lily curiously. "I'm looking for information on a person named Sarah Evans," Lily said, her voice uncertain. "I found an old letter addressed to her, and I think it's connected to something here in town. Maybe her obituary or any records from the past?" The librarian's expression shifted, her curiosity piqued. "Sarah Evans? That's a name I haven't heard in years. She disappeared a long time ago. Let me see what I can find." The librarian led Lily to a small back room filled with local history records. They combed through newspaper clippings, old yearbooks, and other files, but nothing seemed to stand out. Then, just as Lily was about to give up, the librarian found something. A dusty, old article from the Clearwater Gazette. The headline read, "Young woman found dead in the woods. Mystery surrounds Sarah Evans' disappearance." Lily's heart sank as she read the article. Sarah Evans, a 22-year-old woman, had vanished without a trace, and 3 days later her body was found in a forest just outside town. There had been no sign of foul play, but the mystery remained unsolved. The authorities had never determined the cause of death, and the case had gone cold. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. This was no coincidence. Sarah Evans' story was now her story too. She had to know the truth. The afternoon sun hung low as Lily made her way down the winding, narrow road leading out of Clearwater. The small town was nestled between dense forests, and the trees lining the road stretched overhead, casting long shadows over the pavement. She couldn't ignore the sense of foreboding that seemed to follow her, as though the air itself carried whispers of the past. She had barely slept the night before, restless from the discoveries she had made at the library. The article about Sarah Evans' mysterious death still lingered in her mind, its grim details swirling in her thoughts. The coincidence of receiving the letter addressed to Sarah Evans seemed more than a random mix-up. There was a thread here, something connecting Lily to a past she couldn't yet fully understand. The address of Sarah Evans' old home had been written in the obituary. Willow Road. It was located on the edge of town, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow up the houses. As Lily drove further down the road, the houses grew sparser, their lawns overgrown and the air heavier with silence. Eventually she saw the house, a large, dilapidated structure that had clearly seen better days. The windows were dark, the paint peeling off the exterior, and the garden had been left to grow wild, with tall grass and tangled vines. The house was still standing, but it looked as though it had been abandoned for years. Lily parked her car by the curb, feeling a sense of unease wash over her. She wasn't sure what she expected to find, but something about this place, the stillness of it, the quietness that had settled here, told her that Sarah's life, her death, had left an imprint on this house, something that still lingered. Lily hesitated before stepping out of the car, glancing at the house again. She had no idea what she was walking into, but her instincts told her she had to do this. She had to know more. There was a knock at the door, and when no one answered, she tried the handle. To her surprise, it opened easily, as though it had been waiting for her. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust. A faint smell of lavender, the same scent from the letter, seemed to hang in the air. As Lily stepped deeper into the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. There was something here, and she was getting closer to it. Lily sat alone in her apartment late that night, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through her laptop, trying to make sense of everything she had uncovered. The house on Willow Road, the cryptic letter, the obituary. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to lead to a dead end. Sarah Evans' story was filled with shadows, with unanswered questions that only grew darker the deeper Lily dug. But there was one last clue she hadn't yet pursued. The name that had appeared in the letter, buried within its elegant lines, Elijah Porter. Lily typed the name into her search bar, holding her breath. She didn't expect much. After all, it had been over a decade since Sarah had disappeared, but as the search results loaded, her heart skipped a beat. The first link led to a mugshot. Elijah Porter. The man in the photo was older now, but his sharp features and piercing eyes were unmistakable. His criminal record spanned several states, filled with charges ranging from fraud to assault to armed robbery. The timeline was perfect. Porter had been active in the area around the time Sarah had disappeared. A chill ran down Lily's spine. Could this man be the one who had written the letter? And if so, what had he done to Sarah Evans? Lily dug deeper. She found several news articles reporting on Porter's violent past, but nothing that linked him directly to Sarah. There was an unsettling pattern in the reports, though. Porter had always been known for leaving behind victims who seemed to vanish into thin air, never to be found again. In one of the articles, it mentioned that Porter had suddenly disappeared after Sarah's death, never to be seen in Clearwater again. That's when Lily found the final piece of the puzzle, a police report from the year Sarah Evans disappeared. It mentioned a man fitting Porter's description being seen near the site where Sarah's body had been discovered. But the case had gone cold. No one had ever put the pieces together. Lily's hands were shaking now, her mind racing. Elijah Porter wasn't just a figure from the past. He was part of Sarah's story, and now he was a part of hers too. She had to find him. There was no turning back now. Lily's heart hammered in her chest as she drove along the winding highway toward the small town of Morrow Creek. The road stretched out before her, surrounded by flat fields and dense forests. But the beauty of the landscape did little to calm the unease that had settled within her. She hadn't slept much the night before, haunted by the discovery that Elijah Porter, the man connected to Sarah Evans' death, was still alive, and, more chillingly, still on the run. After weeks of searching through old records, cross-referencing police reports, and tracking down every lead she could find, Lily finally stumbled upon a tip that placed Porter in Morrow Creek. It was a small town 2 hours away from Clearwater, and the man had been seen there just a few weeks ago under a false identity. It was her chance to confront him. Lily had tried to tell herself that she was ready for this moment, but as she approached the rundown diner in the center of town where she was told Porter had been spotted, doubt crept in. What if he was dangerous? What if he recognized her from the records she'd uncovered, or worse, the letter she'd received? She wasn't prepared for a confrontation, but she knew she had no choice. Too many lives had been affected by the mystery surrounding Sarah Evans, and Elijah Porter was the key to unlocking it all. The diner was quiet when Lily entered. The smell of burnt coffee and greasy food lingered in the air. The few patrons sitting at booths looked up briefly before returning to their meals. She scanned the room, her eyes falling on a man sitting in the back corner nursing a cup of coffee. His face was older than the mugshot she had seen, but the sharpness in his eyes that seemed to pierce through the dim light, was unmistakable. Elijah Porter. Taking a deep breath, Lily walked over to him, her steps deliberate and steady. As she approached the table, she could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, like a storm about to break. "Elijah Porter?" she asked, her voice unwavering despite the fear gnawing at her insides. He looked up slowly, his gaze flickering with recognition before settling into something darker, something colder. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly, his voice low but threatening. Lily's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. "You don't get to decide that. I'm here for Sarah." The words hung in the air, charged with the weight of everything she had uncovered, everything she needed to know. Elijah's lips twitched into a half-smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't want to hurt her," he muttered, almost to himself. "But people don't just disappear. They can't." Lily's mind raced. This was the moment. This was where the truth would finally come to light. The silence in the diner felt like a weight pressing down on Lily's chest. Elijah Porter's eyes never left hers, cold and calculating, as if he were assessing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. Lily's heart raced, but she kept her composure. She couldn't back down now, not when she was so close to the truth. She took a slow step forward, her voice steady. "Sarah didn't just disappear, Elijah. I know you were involved. The letter, it was from you, wasn't it? The one addressed to her." For a moment, Porter didn't respond. He stared into his coffee cup, his fingers drumming nervously against the porcelain. Lily could see the tension in his jaw, the way his muscles tightened. He wasn't the unshakable figure she had imagined. He was a man cornered, trapped by his past. Finally, Porter looked up, his gaze heavy with regret. "You're right," he muttered. "The letter was from me. I tried to reach her. I wanted to apologize, to explain everything." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "Explain what? What happened to Sarah?" Elijah's shoulders slumped, as though the weight of the years had finally caught up with him. "Sarah wasn't supposed to get involved in this. She wasn't supposed to be part of my mess." He paused, his face darkening. "But I dragged her into it. I loved her, Lily. But I was mixed up with dangerous people who didn't care." Lily leaned in closer, every fiber of her being focused on him. "You're saying you were involved in her death?" "No," Elijah replied, his voice shaking. "I never meant for it to happen. Sarah, she knew too much. She wanted to leave me, she wanted to go away, and I couldn't let her. It was a mistake, but it wasn't murder. She was caught in the crossfire, someone else, someone far worse. They came after her." Lily's mind spun with the weight of his confession. Elijah hadn't killed Sarah Evans, but he had played a part in her downfall, and now, it seemed, the truth about the real killer was slipping just out of reach. The mystery was far from over. Elijah stared at her, his eyes filled with something between regret and fear. "I never wanted her dead, but I'll never be free of this." Lily stood in stunned silence, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, but with so many gaps still left. She had answers, but not all of them. The truth was more complicated than she could have imagined, and one thing was certain. her search for justice was far from finished.